So I planted this whole garden just using native soil here in the Arizona desert. I gathered soil from under the big mesquite trees. Some of the topsoil, some of the really big ones have inches of thick topsoil. So I just use a wheelbarrow and cart that over. And then I dig big holes and just fill them in. And then I plant directly into that topsoil. Seems to have all the nitrogen and nutrients that the plants need, so they do really well. I don't need to fertilize with anything else or buy any bagged materials or fertilizers. So this is just all native topsoil and just soil that we can find here in the desert. Just thought I'd do a little update here. It's finally getting green out here in the desert. The leaves just came out on the trees about a week ago, so they're starting to look nice and green. And I got most of this planted in around mid-April. I've had some close calls with freezes. The tomato plant got froze a few times, but it's still surviving. I have aircrete around things to kind of insulate them. And my little covers on top of the plants. It is May 20th, and here's a look at the garden. We're going to be putting some more shade cloth up over some of these enclosures, so Red's going to help me with that. Little purple butterflies are back this year. They're attracted to the moist soil, so we see a lot of those. So I'm a pretty thrifty person and don't like spending money if I don't have to. So I just use whatever containers I can find. We have a bunch of chicken wire, so everything needs to be protected while it's small, or the birds will dig the plants up. But eventually they get big enough that I can uncover them. But as long as they're small, they need to be well protected. I also planted some Mexican desert bird of paradise along this wall to give some shade to the garden. They do seem to be a pretty fast-growing plant that doesn't mind the heat. They're kind of a small tree/bush. It is mid-July. We just got some rain last night. We got about ½ an inch, which is one of the best rains we've had so far. And here's how everything's looking. We've had very few issues with bugs this year, which is amazing. I think just in general, the mesquite trees don't have many bugs. We've been having lots of bees and butterflies and ladybugs, but very few bug pests, which is super nice. It's been very hot and dry, but finally starting to get a little bit of the monsoon rains. It is mid-August here in southern Arizona, and I just thought I'd do a little update on the garden. We planted this Palo Verde here on the west side of the garden wall to hopefully give some shade to the garden. It turns out that it gets frozen every winter, so So now it's more like just a bush. So it's not offering much shade to the garden. So this year I tried planting some of these desert bird of paradises all across the fence here. I did that in the spring, and I think it was a little too cold for the seeds to germinate. But I did get one that came up right here, and it's already 2.5 feet tall. So these grow really fast here and do really well. We're typically a zone 7 because we do get into the single digits in the winter. But I plan to plant some more of those across this garden wall. Here's some wildflowers that have come up. I've been watering them, so they're up about 6 feet tall and already starting to offer some shade to the garden. And it is the monsoon season, so things are starting to cool down. So far here in mid-August, we've had about 6 inches of rain. The monsoon season is about halfway over, so hopefully we'll get some more. So here's a look inside the garden. I planted a lot of flowers this year, just saved seeds from last year. Got a lot of zinnias that came up and a lot of marigolds. So we have lots of butterflies. I have 3 to 6 inches of mulch on the ground. I prefer not to have it any thicker than that because I feel like it's hard to get water down deep into the soil if there's too much mulch on top. A lot of this is mesquite, and this is just mulch from our local compost facility, and I haven't had any issues with it having pesticides or things that seem to kill the plants, so everything's doing really well in it. The okra is really starting to get going. Right here's a couple of my biggest plants, but they're really bushing out and starting to produce lots of okra. And here's the green beans. I planted the asparagus beans again. Actually, most of those came up by seed that were just already in the ground, and what I actually planted was a red noodle beans. So decided to try those this year. I saw the seed packets, and it turns out they're very similar to the asparagus beans. They taste pretty much the same, except they're red. In the bottom, I planted beets and radishes, so we've already harvested most of those. I planted the beans around the same time, but they're just much slower growing. It takes a lot longer for them to get started. And then along the side here, I planted marigold seeds, and a lot of them came up, and they're just starting to bloom. I decided to try out some Brussels sprouts this year. This was just a 4-pack that I bought for $1.50 at Walmart. And we'll see if we get anything off of that. But the plants are looking pretty good now. Originally, they had a lot of aphids on them, and I just never took the time to mess with them. They were attracting ladybugs, so I wasn't too worried about it. Over here, we've got all these zinnias that came up. You really can't pick what color you're going to get. I really like these pink. They're really bushy. So many layers of petals, so these are really pretty. The butterflies love them. Getting lots of butterflies. And then over here is where we have our butternut squash. I've already picked a few of them. So I have a plant on this side, and then I have one on the other side. But these are 2 different varieties of butternut squash. And here's another look at one of the okra. And then we have some okra along the edges. I just had to keep planting and replanting until I got enough to survive. So some of these are a little bit different ages. And then over there, I have some asparagus and some dill. And there's a pepper plant in there, some more flowers. Here you can see a little bit of hail damage to the squash and some of these leaves. Here's a closer look at this bed. I stuck an extra pepper plant in there, and then I have 3 pepper plants under here that are doing really well. These are just orange snack pepper. I planted these by seed from some that I bought at the store. They're all doing really well. Here's some more zinnia, and here's a better look at that butternut squash plant. Our son gave us some of this extra hyperdobe bag material. He had a section that didn't get sewed together on one side. So he gave me about 100 feet of that, and I've been using it over various plants in the garden and around trees occasionally. So that's worked out pretty well to give a little bit of shade. I've sprayed some neem oil dish soap solution on a few things. We had some beetles that were attacking a few of the leaves on some of these, but I sprayed it a couple of times and really haven't had many more issues. So over here I had planted some potatoes in the spring, so we've already harvested most of those. And the butternut squash is growing into this area. And then this is just a native vine that I left to let it climb up the fence here. Has these little orange flowers on it. And a few marigold, and still have a little bit of potato here that's still growing. I had a zucchini here. I had to pull this up a couple of days ago. I think it got some kind of boring vine beetle. The whole plant just started wilting. So I had to get that out of here, but it did really well. We got a lot of zucchini off of it. And then here's a couple more okra. Here's another zucchini plant. It's a little different variety. It's taken a little bit of a break here. It got some hail damage with some of our storms. And then over here we got a few more okra plants. These are all a little bit smaller, but starting to get going. And then I have some cucumber right here. These are just kind of a small cucumber. I've got some right here that are a little bit overripe. It's kind of a smaller cucumber plant, so it fits this trellis really well. There's some onions in here, just some that I had sprouting, and I just let them go to seed. And here's a yellow pear tomato plant. I've just found that these do really well here, so I planted one of those again. And another pepper plant, extra one that I had, so I stuck it in the bed with this. And then here's a zucchini. I planted some dill right here. I'm just letting the rest of it go to seed. Here's some more of the okra. Some of these are a red okra, so the flowers are a little more orange on them. And the plants get pretty big and bushy. Have some more zinnias. Try to leave a little bit of the wildflowers in here. And there's a look at the garden. This was our last big storm of the monsoon season, and it brought our total up to 8 inches. We also got 2.5 inches during the winter season, so that brings our total for the year to 10.5 inches, which is well below average, but it's still nice and green out here in the desert. Here is a quick look at the garden just before our first freeze of the season. It is October 31st, and here is one final look at the garden. We got down to 26 degrees last night, so everything is good and frozen now. We had a freeze a couple of weeks ago. We got down to 31 for a couple of nights, so a lot of things had already kind of died off. We had a few things that were still left, but those are all pretty much gone now. I had covered the tomato plant and some of the pepper plants, so we have still been trying to cover those, but after this hard freeze, it looks like they're still somewhat alive. So we have a couple more pepper plants over here. And then the asparagus is doing well this year. I just planted it this year, so hopefully it will survive the winter and we can get some asparagus next season. I did put chicken wire under this bed, so hopefully we don't get groundhogs coming up in here and digging up all the roots. If we can keep it a little bit watered so everything doesn't dry out too bad. We got a lot of butternut squash this year. Those did really well. Quite a few beans, a decent amount of tomatoes. Cucumbers did really well. Some of the okra didn't get very big, but still got a decent amount of okra. So that's the end of our gardening season here in southern Arizona.